I sat alone in my tiny kitchen that night, the clock ticking louder than it should have, like it was reminding me of everything I hadn't done. The only light came from the little lamp on the counter, casting shadows across the table where I sat with a single house key spinning between my fingers. I don't even know why I was holding it. Maybe because it gave me something solid to focus on, something real when my mind was drowning in words I couldn't forget. My mother's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and cold, like it had been carved into me. "You can't even take care of yourself." She didn't whisper it. She didn't slip it in quiet. She screamed it, in front of Chase, in front of Sloan, in front of everyone. And they didn't defend me. They just looked away, like always. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the refrigerator covered in photos. My mom with Chase on his graduation day. My mom with Sloan when she bought her first car. There were smiles, celebrations, shiny memories taped up for everyone to see, but none with me. None of the times I stayed up nights working double shifts. None of the times I came home with straight A's in night school. None of the little victories that kept me moving forward. It was like I didn't count unless I was failing. I pressed my thumb against the key, the metal biting into my skin. I wasn't even sure why I had kept it on me, but there it was. A reminder, not of failure, but of something different. Something my mother didn't know about. Something none of them knew about. I whispered into the empty room, "One day, Mom. One day you're going to see me." My voice cracked, not because I doubted it, but because I was tired. Tired of waiting for the kind of love that came so easily to Chase and Sloan. Tired of hoping that if I just worked harder, she'd notice. The truth is, I had stopped hoping a long time ago. I closed my eyes and I saw her face again, her lips pressed tight. Her eyes full of disappointment, like I was the family burden. I felt the burn in my chest rise up, but I didn't let it spill over. Not anymore. I was done crying about it. Done explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. I looked down at the key one more time, and a small smile pulled at my lips. Not a happy smile, not even a proud one. More like a quiet promise, because that key wasn't just a piece of metal. It was proof of something bigger. I set it on the table and leaned forward, resting my elbows on the wood. My heart was steady now, calmer than it had been all day. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I already knew what was coming, I whispered again, softer this time. "You'll see." Growing up in my house always felt like standing in the shadows of two bright spotlights. Chase and Sloan, my brother and sister, were the stars. Chase was the golden boy, always winning trophies, always being praised for how driven he was. Sloan had this charm about her, the kind that made people lean in when she talked. Teachers adored her, friends followed her, and my mom. My mom just glowed when she looked at them. I was the one who tried. That's what Mom used to say when people asked about me. "Rowan's trying. She's figuring things out." It was never said with pride, only pity. I learned early to keep my head down. I did the chores no one else bothered with. I cleaned up after the fights, stayed quiet when things got tense, and tried to make myself useful in ways nobody noticed. I remember one Christmas when Chase got a brand new suit because he had landed an internship. Sloan got a camera because she had an eye for beauty. I opened my gift and found a cookbook. Mom smiled like it was thoughtful, but all I heard was, "Here, this is what fits you." Something safe. Something small, but I didn't stop working. I couldn't. I picked up shifts at the diner when I was just old enough to carry trays. Every night after school, I smelled like grease and coffee, but at least it was money in my pocket. Mom never asked where it came from, but she never said thank you when I helped cover the electric bill either. She acted like the lights just magically stayed on. On weekends, while Chase was networking and Sloan was at parties, I was in my tiny bedroom with a stack of textbooks. I enrolled in night classes, signed up for certifications, and studied until my eyes burned. Nobody saw the late nights. Nobody saw me dragging myself to work in the morning with less than 3 hours of sleep. But I saw it. I felt it. Those quiet sacrifices were mine. There were small victories that mattered to me even if no one else noticed. The day I paid off my first credit card without asking anyone for help. The moment my landlord pulled me aside and said, "You're one of the only tenants I never worry about." I wanted to run home and tell my mom. But what would she have said? Probably something like, "That's what you're supposed to do." Still, I kept going. I kept saving every dollar I could, folding it away like a secret only I understood. I met with a realtor in hushed conversations, my hands shaking as I signed papers, terrified someone in the family would find out. It wasn't just about buying a place. It was about proving to myself most of all that I could stand on my own. Every time my mom compared me to Chase or Sloan, it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. But behind the sting there was this fire. A stubborn voice whispering, "Wait, just wait. One day they'll see what you've built." The night everything cracked started like any other family dinner. Mom had made her famous roast, the one she always bragged about, and the table was crowded with food and voices. Chase was talking about some big promotion at his firm. Sloan was sharing stories about a gala she'd been invited to, and I just sat there, listening, nodding, trying to stay part of it without drawing too much attention. That was my role, after all, background noise. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe it was something small I said, maybe I laughed at the wrong time, or maybe Mom just decided it was my turn to be the target. She put down her fork, looked straight at me and said, "You know, Rowan, you really should start figuring out your life. You're not a kid anymore." The words stung, but I kept my head down, cutting into my food. I could feel Chase glance at me, then quickly look back at his plate. Sloan sipped her wine like she hadn't heard a thing. I tried to brush it off, but Mom didn't stop. She raised her voice a little, her frustration spilling over. "Honestly, you can't even take care of yourself. Look at your brother. Look at your sister. Do you think they sit around waiting for life to happen?" The whole table went silent. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. My face burned hot, but I stayed quiet. Inside, though, it felt like something had split open. "Mom," I managed to say, my voice soft, trying not to shake. "That's not fair." "Not fair?" She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Rowan, it's the truth. You've always been the one I worry about the most. You drift. You struggle. She stopped, but only to take a breath before cutting deeper. "You can't even handle your own life. How do you expect to ever be anything more?" Chase shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Sloan finally looked at me, but her eyes dropped just as quickly. Neither of them said a word. It was like they all agreed. Like the whole room was nodding along in silence. My chest ached, but I refused to let her see me break. I pressed my lips together, set my fork down gently, and stared at the tablecloth. Her words circled in my head, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and throw every sacrifice, every late night, every hidden victory right in her face. But instead I sat there, calm on the outside while my insides twisted into knots. Something shifted in me that night. I realized I was never going to win her approval with explanations or arguments. She had already written my story for me, the weak one, the failure. So I made a decision in that silence. If she was never going to listen to my words, then I'd show her something she couldn't ignore. After that dinner, I stopped trying to explain myself. I didn't argue with Mom anymore, didn't try to defend every choice I made. Instead, I got quiet. Quiet, but focused. While she was busy praising Chase for climbing higher at work, and Sloan for shining in every social circle, I was signing papers. Meeting with the realtor. Watching my savings drain into something bigger than me. Something permanent. Every signature felt like a secret weapon I was building, one stroke of a pen at a time. The day I got the keys, I sat in my car and just stared at them in my palm. They didn't look like much, just a little silver set with a tag that had my last name printed on it. But to me, they were everything. Proof that I wasn't the helpless girl she thought I was. Proof that I could build a life on my own, brick by brick, even if no one clapped for me while I did it. I didn't tell anyone. Not Chase, not Sloan, and especially not Mom. It wasn't the kind of thing you brag about. No, this was something I wanted to deliver at the perfect moment, when silence would be louder than shouting. That moment came sooner than I thought. Another family dinner, the same old script. Chase talking about his new office, Sloane showing off pictures from another event, Mom glowing with pride. Then her eyes landed on me, sharp as ever. "Rowan," she said, "I hope you're taking notes from your brother and sister. You're not getting any younger." The table went quiet. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but this time I didn't swallow it down. I didn't argue either. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked, frowning as she picked it up. "Open it," I said. My voice was steady, calm. She tore the flap and pulled out the papers, her eyes scanning the words. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then she looked down at the keys I set gently beside her plate. "I bought a house," I told her softly. "For you." The words hung in the air. Chase's fork clattered onto his plate. Sloane blinked, her mouth slightly open. Mom just stared at the keys, her lips parting like she couldn't believe what she was holding. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, letting the silence carry the weight of what I had done. It wasn't revenge in the way people expect, with yelling and anger. No. My revenge was calm, measured. I handed her the very thing she said I could never manage, proof that I could take care of not just myself, but her too. And I watched the words she had thrown at me crumble in her throat. The room went silent in a way I'd never heard before. Not the usual silence where everyone avoided looking at me, but something heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mom's fingers trembled around the keys, her eyes darting back to the papers as if reading them again would change the truth written there. I watched her lips move, like she wanted to say something but nothing came out. For a second, she looked smaller, like all that certainty she carried. The pride, the judgment, had been knocked out of her. Chase shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening like he couldn't decide if he was impressed or angry. Sloane set her glass down so gently it barely made a sound, her eyes flicking from me to Mom and back again. But nobody said a word. It was Mom who broke first. A sharp inhale, then a sound I had never heard from her before. She started to cry. Not the kind of crying that came with anger or frustration, but something deeper, rawer. Her shoulders shook, and her hand flew to her mouth as if she didn't want us to see her break. But it was too late. I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, more like release. All those years of being told I was weak, of being treated like the extra piece in a family puzzle, they all funneled into this moment. I didn't have to scream or defend myself. The keys said it all. Mom looked at me through tears, her face twisted with guilt and something close to disbelief. "Rowan, you did this?" Her voice cracked like she couldn't believe I was capable. I nodded, calm. "Yes, I told you I could take care of myself. And I can take care of more than that." The weight of those words seemed to fall across the whole table. Chase leaned back, silent. For once not the star of the conversation. Sloane bit her lip, her expression softening in a way I wasn't used to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. Mom set the papers down and reached for me, her hand shaking. Her voice came out in a whisper. I was wrong." Then louder, breaking into a sob. "I was so wrong about you." Tears streamed down her face and I just sat there, steady, watching the woman who had never once admitted fault crumble in front of everyone. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt heavier than that. But it was real. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of judgment anymore. It was respect. It was shock. It was the sound of everything I had ever waited for finally being acknowledged. And in that silence, I finally felt seen. Mom reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. For a second, I almost pulled back. Years of sharp words, of feeling like I was never enough, made me want to protect myself. But then I saw her face, red, streaked with tears, trembling in a way I had never seen before. She wasn't the untouchable woman who always had the last word. She was just human. She stood slowly, the keys clutched in her hand, and walked around the table to me. When she wrapped her arms around me, It was awkward at first, stiff, like neither of us knew how to do it. Then her body broke against mine, and I felt her shoulders shake as she whispered, "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I just held her for a moment, steady and calm. It wasn't about pity or anger anymore. It was about finally being heard. When I pulled back, I looked her in the eye and said quietly, "I don't want apologies, Mom. I just want respect." She nodded, tears still running down her cheeks, and I knew something in her had shifted. Maybe it wouldn't erase all the years of hurt, but it was a start. Chase cleared his throat, trying to mask the way his face had softened. He muttered, "Good job, Rowan," almost under his breath, but I caught it. Sloane smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no envy, only a quiet acknowledgement. For once, I wasn't the outsider at that table. The rest of the night moved differently. Conversation slowed, laughter was quieter, and no one dared to throw another jab my way. I didn't feel like I had won a fight. I felt like I had finally ended one. Later, when I got home, I placed a spare house key on the little wooden shelf by my front door. I stared at it for a while, the metal catching the soft light from the lamp. To anyone else, it would look ordinary, but to me, it was everything. Freedom, strength, and proof that I didn't need anyone's permission to stand tall. I thought about all those nights I spent studying while everyone else was out having fun. The double shifts, the exhaustion, the moments when I thought maybe Mom was right about me. That key silenced all of it. I exhaled deeply, a weight I'd been carrying for years finally sliding off my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't need to imagine the day she would see me. She already had, and as I turned off the light and headed to bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not because she finally hugged me, not because my family's eyes had changed, but because I had done it on my own. Respect wasn't given to me. I earned it, and now I would never let it go. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss more moments of revenge, drama, and lessons from life. And I'd love to hear your own stories in the comments. This is our space to share, connect, and remind each other we're not alone.